processing. They arrived shortly thereafter.
And was that Doug Lucas and Lincoln Folkers?
Yes.
What did you observe as far as a damaged vehicle?
When we arrived on scene, we had cordoned off an area where there had been a vehicle that had been burned. It was reported that earlier in the evening, a vehicle was reported on fire. The fire department had came out and extinguished those flames and put out the fire. When we arrived, we had a damaged vehicle from an apparent fire that occurred from inside the vehicle, and we had just documented the scene, the perimeter around it, as well as the vehicle itself.
Did the vehicle have a license plate on it?
There was no license plate on the vehicle at that time.
You said you waited for a search warrant?
That is correct.
Did one ultimately arrive?
Yes, we did a preliminary search, and once the search warrant actually arrived, we then processed the vehicle itself.
As part of the processing of the vehicle, did you extract some possible fingerprints and shoe prints off of the trunk lid?
Yes, we determined that the exterior of the vehicle would be processed by the CBI agents, myself and my 2 trainees, and the interior of the vehicle would be processed by the fire investigators from the fire department.
If I could have you grab Exhibit 501 from that cart. What is that item, sir?
This item are the individual latent prints that the CBI agents, including myself, had collected from the vehicle and then placed into...
I'm going to ask that they not be displayed until they're admitted, please.
Agent Saluto, if I could just have you look at it first, and then once we admit it into evidence, I'll have you show it to the jury, but if I could just have you describe what you're looking at first.
Describing the evidence is the latent fingerprint cards that we collected from the scene that were originally packaged in the package that we did at the scene.
Okay. And you were the one that collected those and booked them, or at least you were there when that was collected and booked?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move to admit People's Exhibit 501.
Mr. Coleman, for the record.
Can I approach to look at this one?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, I have no objection.
Sorry, you weren't near a microphone.
Sorry, Judge. I have no objection.
All right, thank you. 501 is admitted without objection. Thank you.
Agent Saluto, I guess your former Agent Saluto, is it okay if I just refer to you as Agent Saluto? How would you prefer to be referred to as?
Mr. Saluto is fine.
Mr. Saluto? Mr. Saluto, the item that's identified as a possible shoe print, who determined that that was a possible shoe print?
Am I able to hold it up?
Yes, it's now in evidence, so you're welcome to hold it up and show the jury what you're looking at.
The item here in question was a best determination by me and the CBI agents, as at the time, I am not a latent print examiner, but the pattern appeared as though it could possibly be a shoe print. And that's what we determined at the time, that it could possibly be a shoe print.
Others have speculated that it was other things, is that right?
It's the interpretation of the beholder, of whoever's looking at it.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was anybody able to figure out what, if anything, to compare that against?
That would not be my determination. At the scene, because we found a pattern of something, we collected it to make sure that if it ever became anything or it became nothing, it was at least collected and not overlooked.
Okay. If I can have you next look at People's Exhibit 502. Should be the smaller one on top there. What is that item, sir?
People's Exhibit 502 is business cards or apparent business cards that we collected from within the scene.
Do you recall where in the vehicle those were?
I do not recall a specific location within the vehicle, as the fire investigator identified a lot of locations within the vehicle that items were collected.
And were there some items that were found in the front passenger seat by the feet?
If I recall, there were some items that were found in the front and the rear passenger seats. These I'd have to refer to my notes exactly where they were located.
Could I ask you to do that, please?
Your Honor, if I may refer to my notes.
Is there any objection?
No, sir.
That's fine. Thank you for asking, sir.
And Mr. Saluto, if you could just let us know what it is you're looking at when you determine what it is that's refreshing your memory, if you could just let us know which page.
I'm referring to my notes, the actual crime scene report, and what I currently have is the part of the litigation packet that was prepared by the prosecutor that contained my specific notes.
I apologize. I have a notebook under this table.
Oh,
Can I
Mr.
grab it?
Colvin? Sure. Thank you.
No worries.
Within the notes on page litigation, CBI crime scene investigation, page 6 of 120, or litigation page 5,329. As I had previously said, it just has from the front and rear passenger floors as collected or as identified by the investigator.
So inside the cavity of the vehicle as opposed to the trunk?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I'd move to admit People's Exhibits 502.
Mr. Colvin?
No objection.
502 is admitted.
And sir, those are business cards of which business?
The name on it says Models Incorporated.
Thank you. Next, I could have you look at People's Exhibit 503. Should be on that card, the closest one to you, I believe. If I could have you remove the contents of that so that you're able to find the original packaging that you packaged this in to see if you recognize the items.
Maybe if you could do it on the floor on the other side of you, just, the jury's not allowed to see things until they're admitted, so, thank you, sir.
Do you recognize Exhibit 503, sir?
Yes.
What is it?
503 are the clothing articles that were collected from within the vehicle.
And those are items that you collected?
These are items that we collected as identified by the fire investigator.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move to admit People's Exhibit 503.
Mr. Colvin?
No objection.
503 is admitted.
Mr. Saluto, if I could have you remove the individual clothing items out of there, as well as the other bags and other items in there so that you can explain to the jury what those are. First, can I ask you, do you recall where in the vehicle those items were located?
If I recall, I believe they're on the front passenger floor.
Okay, and what is that item you have in your hand now?
They were just identified as clothing.
Does that appear to have some sort of a flowery or paisley type pattern on it?
Yes, it does.
Okay. If I could have you look at the next item?
Should I put it back?
You can put it back in the bag. Yes, sir.
The next item was a parent jean material type clothing.
Does it appear to be denim-type shorts with some fire damage?
Either shorts or pants, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. If I could have you put that back in the bag. And if I could just have you explain to the jury what those other items there are that were in the bag.
The other items are the original packaging of the evidence here. As you can see, we have the red seal across the top is my original seal when I was at the scene. And then we have the case number, the item number, the date for which I collected it, my initials, and a brief description of clothes.
Thank you. Just turn the gloves on. Agent, if I could next have you look at the next item, which should be People's Exhibit 504. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
And Agent, I'm going to put some nitrile gloves up there for you in case you need them. Do you recognize that item?
Yes.
What is that?
It's a Pampered Chef book as well as some other documentation.
Is that an item you recovered as well from the vehicle?
Yes, it was.
Where was that? Where were those items recovered?
I don't recall if they were on the front or rear passenger seat, but they were within the vehicle.
As opposed to the trunk?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd move to admit People's Exhibit 504.
No objection. 504 is admitted.
And Mr. Saluto, if I could have you just remove that, remove some of those items and just hold them up for the jury so they can see generally what those items are.
It appears as though the contents of the Pampered Chef have been separated into individual packaging. It says right here, plastic center organizer removed from item 90, from the item CBI's item number 91.
And then some of those papers, if I could just have you just pull some of those papers out of there so that the jury can see what sorts of papers are in there.
So you can see it's a plastic portion of an organizer. Some type of paperwork.
Are there also brochure-type papers?
Yeah, they appear to be as if they're Pampered Chef type of paperwork. I did not, at the scene, we did not actually inventory or separate the actual Pampered Chef. We collected as a whole. So the individually separation was performed later within the laboratory by a different analyst.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Saluto. If you could just return all of those back to that original bag. And then next, pick up Exhibit 505, sir. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
What is that item?
This was the day planner that was also collected from within the vehicle.
And again, you're talking about the interior cavity of the vehicle as opposed to the trunk?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you collected that item as well?
Yes.
And the item is actually inside that box, is that correct?
Yes, the original packaging, is I could see the original packaging, and then it appears as though at some point later, through analysis, it was repackaged separately.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd move to admit Exhibit 505.
Do you have an objection, Mr. Coleman?
No, sir.
505 is admitted.
Thank you, sir. You could just stick those all back on that cart. I have some additional questions for you about a different role you had in this case. You mentioned also as part of your duties with CBI that you do chemical testing, and you mentioned fire debris at one point.
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what your training is specifically related to analyzing items from fire?
The training that I've received with fire debris analysis is the identification of possible accelerants or fuels that could be used in a fire, whether that's bulk samples, collecting a liquid and saying it's maybe gasoline, diesel, or some other type of fuel, or collecting debris from a fire to determine if an accelerant or a fuel has been placed there to start the fire or even just present within that debris.
And do you have a degree in chemistry?
Yes, I have a forensic science degree.
What year was that?
That was back in 1997. The courses were heavily in chemistry, all the way from general chemistry up to physical chemistry.
Did you also do a forensic internship program?
Yes, prior to graduating and receiving my degree, I did an internship with the Broward Sheriff's Office in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I received hands-on crime lab experience.
In 2000, did you take a course in mass spectral interpretation?
Yes, over the years, I have taken various courses to help provide my, or maintain my proficiency in forensic chemistry, and that is one of them.
Can you explain to the jury what mass spectral interpretation is?
One of the key instrumentation used within the forensic laboratory is a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. I'll refer to this as the GCMS. This instrument is an instrument that is utilized in various aspects within the laboratory for controlled substances, fire debris analysis, as well as other trace analysis. That instrument can be used to separate a component and then identify the individual components within a mixture. The mass spectrometer portion of it is what actually gives a profile or ion spectra of what may be present within the sample. That is what the course that I had taken was part of that interpretation of being able to identify and recognize patterns as well as identify substances that are in chemicals.
You indicated that you also do identification of accelerants as part of this. Is that the machine you utilize to do that?
Yes, it is our primary machine or instrument.
That machine's used for lots of purposes, is that correct?
Yes, it can be used for anything chemically analysis or in the chemical analysis of substances.
Standard drug testing, like in a normal drug possession case, something like that, would that use that machine as well?
Yes, or like currently with my explosives, what we do for explosives, yes.
And that's your current role with the Department of Defense?
Yes.
You're still utilizing that type of machine? Did you take...
Sorry, he nodded
Yes.
his head.
I'm sorry, was that a yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Did you also take a course in basic fire debris analysis in 2001?
Yes, I did a basic course and then followed up with an advanced course.
And that was that same year?
That was,
How many times have you worked arson investigations?
within CBI, there'd be about several different cases that I've worked. Exact numbers I do not recall, but that was my primary role while I was with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI. I handled all fire debris investigations for 3/4 of the state, the whole western slope, all extending down all the way through Pueblo. And so the numbers would be however many came in at a time. I do not recall the numbers.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move to qualify Mr. Saluto as an expert in fire debris analysis and identification of accelerants.
Mr. Coleman, do you have an objection?
No objection.
All right, I do find the witness is qualified in the area of fire debris analysis and the identification of accelerants. He's qualified as an expert in those areas. He's therefore allowed to
Saluto, there are shredded up pieces of paper inside that box. Do you have any idea why?
I have no clue.
No.
It could be
Okay.
packaging, maybe.
Okay, that's not something that's normal with those cans?
No, I would have received the cans pretty much, and the evidence just as they are here.
Okay. Did you receive those items?
Yes, I did.
And are those items exhibits 508, 509, and 510?
Yes, they are.
And how do you know that you received those items?
On each one of them, I have my personal markings that I place when I receive the evidence. That is the CBI case number, the exhibit number, the date in which I did my analysis, and my personal initials. And they are on all three of the items.
When you received those items, did they appear in any way to have been tampered with?
Now, when I received them, all of them had the original seals intact. If there's a discrepancy or the seals are not intact, I would have contacted the agency and not proceeded with my analysis. Since there was no issues, I then proceeded to open the evidence and do my analysis, for which then at the end, I then resealed it with my personal initials and seal.
And all of that is contained on each of those items?
Yes, the blue evidence tape on all three are my final sealing of the evidence.
What tests did you conduct on those three items?
I take a look at what the evidence has inside each of the exhibits. Take a look, see if there's any type of smells, any odors, anything present that may not be routine or normal. If there's anything, I am not an expert in odors, none to say, but if I were to smell something that like, there's a little smell there, I could sit there and say, yeah, I may smell something, or if I can identify something, I would identify it. I would then inventory what was inside, or at least take a description of what was inside each container or evidence. And then I would perform my analysis, in which, in this case, each one was then analyzed and then subsequently ran on the GCMS.
I'm sorry, you said you did run the test on the GCMS?
Yes, I would do my analysis and then conclude it with the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer.
In 2007, did CBI have those machines?
Yes.
And were they regularly tested to make sure that they were working?
Yes, we have routine quality control, quality assurance, QA/QC measures that we do. These measures include instrumentation as well as blanks and various different things to coincide with the evidence itself as well as the instrument itself. And all those are performed on a routine basis with the evidence. And if anything were to have been negative or been outside of the QA/QC process, the evidence would not have been ran on the instrument, or it would have been reran to ensure. And in this case, it was ran once as everything was working fine.
The solvent blank was ran once?
We have solvent blanks as well as method blanks. Solvent blank is a solvent that is used in the analysis, and a method blank is a procedure that we run simultaneously along with the evidence to show that the process that I'm performing actually works as well.
Did all of that occur in this case?
Yes, it did.
Was there any indication that the testing machines or procedures were not operating properly?
No, there was no indication. The instruments were working in proper order, and analysis was performed.
Did you perform those tests as you were trained?
Yes, I did.
On what date did you perform the tests?
The specific date that it was run on the instrument, I'd have to refer to my notes, but the initial, I received the evidence on August 8th of 2007.
May I approach her?
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you it's marked People's Exhibit 511. For the record, I've shown this to Defense Counsel.
Thank you.
Do you recognize that document, sir?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is a laboratory report generated by the Colorado investigation of my findings.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd move to admit People's Exhibit 511.
Do you have an objection, Mr. Fulton?
No, sir.
511 is admitted without objection.
Agents, or Mr. Saluto, you indicated that as part of your process, you write down a description of what you found in each item.
Yes, I do.
I'd like to start with item 508. How did you identifier, what did you use to describe or identify what item 508 was?
People's Exhibit 508 is CBI item number 6, and that was a sealed metal container containing burnt plastic and debris.
And that was one of the items you tested with the GCMS?
Yes, it was.
With what result?
Determined that the item, CBI item number 6, disclosed the presence of an ignitable liquid from the gasoline class. This class includes all brands and grades of gasoline, including gasohol and some type of camp fuels.
What was the description you gave to item, People's Exhibit 509?
People's Exhibit 509 is also CBI item number 7, and that was a sealed metal container containing a burnt vehicle floor mat.
I'm sorry, you said a floor mat?
Yes.
Okay. And that was one of the items you tested with the GCMS?
Yes, it was.
With what result?
And same with CBI item number 6. It disclosed the presence of ignitable liquid from the gasoline class. This class includes all brands and grades of gasoline, including gasohol and some type of camp fuels.
And what about item 510? How was that described?
People's Exhibit 510 is also referred to as CBI item number 8. That is a sealed manila envelope containing a capped vial containing a brownish liquid with sediment.
And you tested that item as well?
Yes, and the same procedures with the GCMS.
And what result on that item?
This one came back as no ignitable liquids were detected in CBI exhibit, or CBI item number 8.
Can you explain when you say it was all brands of gasoline, gasohol, camp fuels, can you explain how you categorize items like that, or class items like that?
Within the laboratory, we identify the class of gasoline. We cannot identify if it's grade 87, 90, 92, the different type of octanes. We cannot determine the different type of brands, whether it's Safeway brand versus a Shell brand. So all we can do is identify that there is gasoline in that class.
Within the things that you are able to determine, is the formula the same for all gasolines here?
The fundamental gasoline is the same. The different additives, the different location may change a little bit, but the basic formulation of gasoline is the same.
If I can have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, I have no further questions for the witness at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I want to start with the chemical analysis you did in this case. Now, some vapors off of that item. Is that correct?
Basically, yes.
And then you're shooting a laser beam through that vapor that comes off of the item, correct?
Not necessarily like a laser, but we do ionize it, yes.
Okay. And then that generates the machine then generates a chart which shows a printout or a results table. Is that right?
Yes, it does.
And you compare those results, you compare those to a known library of results you already have. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So, can I approach the witness?
Yes, you may. Thanks.
I'm showing you Defendant's Exhibit Q and Defendant's Exhibit R. Can you look at those and tell me if you recognize those? One of them over there. There.
Yes.
Okay. And what is Q?
Defendant's Exhibit Q is part of the extracted ion profile data that can be obtained with the GCMS.
Okay, so it is a computer-generated chart that comes off of the gas chromatograph. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And what is R?
R is a library search report for an item that was ran on the instrument as well.
Okay, so that's another result. These documents are provided in the normal practice of CBI to prosecution, who, as you understand it, turns it over to me. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Judge, we would offer both Q and R as evidence at this time.
Do you have an objection, Mr. Rubenstein?
I would object as to foundation for relevance at this point. I mean, I don't dispute the authenticity of the documents, I just don't know what the purpose of them is at this point.
Mr. Colvin?
We're going to be discussing how the gas chromatograph works. These will show that they are standard libraries. One of these documents shows gasoline from the Montrose gas station. We're going to talk about the fact that he is unable to go beyond the classification of gas to the identification. However, they do have a gasoline specifically from Montrose Conoco in their library that they could compare it against. And then we're going to go from there into, if they had a known sample, they could have ran that. So,
I have no objection to their admission on that basis, Your Honor.
Okay. Defendants Q and R are both admitted without objection. Yes, sir. Thanks.
I'm going to project these on that screen behind you, okay? May I have permission to publish Q and R, Judge?
Is there any objection, Mr. Rubenstein?
No, sir.
That's fine. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first off, let's look at boy, is that hard to read. Okay. So, may I have continuous permission to?
Yes. Is this Q or just for the record?
This is Q.
Okay. Thank you. That's fine. You can approach.
So, this is generate, not the handwriting, right? But the little peaks, that's generated by the computer, right?
The computer, yeah, as far as the instrumentational analysis, yes.
Okay. So somebody ran Montrose Conoco gasoline through the gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer, and they generated that profile. Is that correct?
Yes, it was actually myself, yes.
Okay. And this is the alkane profile. As a chemist, you know what alkane is. But bottom line is that's a type of chemical that in this particular thing shows up with these particular peaks here. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this handwriting over here, that's your handwriting, is that correct? I'm looking at the right side of the screen, Judge.
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Now, when you reference per library search, what we're talking about is CBI has a database that has all kinds of standards that you, as the analyst, can compare a result to these known standards, right?
Yes, it is. And that specifically is referring to my markings that I made over to the left-hand side, not to the actual Montrose conical gasoline. So per library search are the, I don't know. We're referring to the C7, C8, C9, C10, C11, and C12 is what I'm referring to as this statement right here.
Okay. So, this is something that when you get something in the gasoline class, this would be one of the standards you would look at because this is gasoline from a Montrose Conoco. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, when you talk to prosecution, you talked about this difference between classification and identification. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. This clearly shows what looks like 85 octane Montrose Conoco gasoline came up with when you ran it through this machine at some point, right?
It's not referring to the octane rating as much as it's referring to a weathered sample.
Okay. Bottom line is gasoline changes from distributor to distributor, right?
The gasoline doesn't change as much as we referenced earlier, the different additives and the different things that chemicals they put into it.
Well, you say the gasoline doesn't change, but if I get gasoline out of the pump over at the Shell, and then we go down the road to Conoco, that gasoline could actually put out a different chart here from your machine, correct?
It would put out a similar chart. It may be different in certain ratios or different aspects, but the overall profile for the actual gasoline portion of it should be the same. There may be different, slight noticeable changes.
And the differences and the changes would be from additives that have been put into the gasoline by each of the distributors or the manufacturer. Is that right?
That, as well as maybe how long it's been in the storing tanks, the conditions that were before they arrived to the gas station. It would be all those little things that go into play. So we don't look at those specifics, we look at the overall profile.
And the season, during particular seasons of the year, federal government requires different things to be put in gasoline. And there's a bunch of variables in this, right?
That is true, yes.
So if you go out and you run gasoline through your machine, it in fact may not look the same for a different kind of gasoline from a different place at a different time, right?
The overall appearance may not be, but the specific things that we look for within gasoline will be there still.
And so that's why we're talking about classification. The overall stuff stays the same. It is something that has an alkane profile that looks something like that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there are other things in your library such as
This one is specifically a library search or a mass spectral library search for CBI item number 6, which I believe was State's Exhibit 508, if I recall.
So, toluene, that is a type of solvent, correct?
Yes,
And toluene is actually something anybody can go buy over at Home Depot. You use it as paint thinner, or you can use it as paint thinner, right?
that is correct.
Okay. So if you find toluene, you have that little spectral thing that we saw on the last exhibit. Toluene is always going to look the same as toluene. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Because toluene is a simple compound, it's always going to show up as toluene, right?
Unless it gets broken down into other components based on heat or other byproduct.
Okay. Gasoline, though, much more complicated, right?
Yeah, gasoline is a compiled of different chemicals to make up an overall gasoline.
So when you tested fire debris in this particular case, what you determined was it was in that class of gasoline, but there's no way to say whether or not it was any particular gasoline because you don't have samples for every gasoline in the world. Is that right?
That is correct.
Now, CBI is a state-funded agency, right?
Yes.
And CBI is funded by the state specifically for the purposes of helping law enforcement, correct?
It is a state agency to help the public, whether that's a criminal trial or public trial. We help the public in that nature.
A public trial? What's the difference between a criminal trial and a public trial?
I've testified in lower level courts and different things, so we have different measures in which we work. It is not always for the prosecutor.
Okay. Well, but your job is to support law enforcement. That's what it says on your webpage under your mission statement, right?
Yes, we support the law enforcement agency, but it is for the people because if there is nothing to find, we can either find information or also prove information. And so in case of DNA analysis, you may include somebody or you may exclude somebody. In this case, because we found something, it is part of the prosecutor's case.
Okay, I get what you're saying. You guys are neutral, you're not just out there trying to help law enforcement, you're out there trying to find the truth, right?
Yes.
Okay. But the fact of the matter is, CBI has a whole procedure set up for law enforcement to call you up and ask for testing, right?
Yes.
There's no form I fill out and you will run out and go examine a crime scene for me, is there?
No, there is not.
But a phone call by Investigator Heaton Street to you guys, and you're on your way out there, right?
Yes, through proper channels, yes, we would respond.
Okay, so I understand you're there for the people, for truth, but you got a special relationship with those guys because nobody else gets to get you to run out and go check things out for them, right?
That would be local law enforcement and everything else. Like I said, we're at the state level, we have our chain of command.
Okay. So, backing up. You guys are state funded, you have money, but CBI is limited in what's in the libraries. Is that correct? In other words, you can't go out and by yourself create new samples to compare against, right?
Can you please explain?
Well,
When you say create new samples, if you can explain.
well, you got this GCMS result when you ran Montrose Conoco gas through this, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go out and generate these results and put them into the library for any substance that you want?
If it's a known sample, yes, we could potentially do that.
So, now we have an issue. if you had a known sample of the gasoline that you were supposed to be looking for in fire debris, you might have been able to compare it just like you could compare it against Montrose Conoco gas, right?
Yes, we would, but it would still be in the classification, not in the specific identification from one to one.
Okay. But if these guys had in their possession a red gas can from Bob Scott RV that had the gasoline that these guys say set the fire of that car, it probably would have been worthwhile for you to run that gas through your machine and get a result so you can put it in your library. Would you agree?
Not necessarily, because we'd also have to figure out who anybody else that bought from that gas station as well. I mean, if you think about a gas station, however many people that go through a gas station, let alone all the gas stations in Grand Junction, to sit there and say one can from one individual identified back to a source, that's nothing we could do. That's why we sit there and say it's just gasoline.
Whoa. The question is, the gas in the gas can set the fire. It's the same gasoline. They say that it can, imagine with me, they say that gas that set that fire came out of this gas can.
My analysis could not determine that.
Well, you could run whatever's in that gas can through your machine, right?
If I ran that gas can and it was in fact gasoline, that's what I would report, is that it was gasoline.
Okay. And you'd have a result, just like you do from Montrose Conoco, right?
Yes.
And if the gasoline doesn't have any different additives, hasn't been changed at all, it's the same gas can, it would be really informative, wouldn't you think?
Still would not be able to say, scientifically, I could not still say that that gas came, was the same as what started the fire. I would just report it out as being gasoline.
But you'd have this chart, and you would have a chart for the gas can, and even I, who's not a trained chemist, can look at a chart and see where the peaks match up. We could do that much, wouldn't you agree?
You could.
And it would certainly be more specific than just saying it has gasoline characteristics, right?
It could potentially be more specific, but that would be a limitation that we don't do in the laboratory.
Well, the fact of the matter is, CBI Laboratory doesn't do identification. CBI Laboratory does classification, isn't that correct?
Correct.
CBI Laboratory is not set up for identification. You're only set up to compare against general classes of things, unless it's a very simple compound like toluene, correct?
Yes, if it was something more individual or simplistic and not gasoline or diesel, then yes, we potentially could identify it.
But CBI has access to labs like the FBI lab, right?
We don't necessarily have access to that. That would be something that would have to be requested by local law enforcement.
Okay. But if you guys at CBI ask for an assistance from an outside law enforcement agency like the FBI, you're more likely to get somewhere than if I call them up and say, hey, FBI, I would like some help, right?
Potentially only because of the law enforcement nature, but the answer we'd receive from FBI is that they would perform the exact same analysis that we performed, because it's standard across the board through the United States.
But the FBI lab has the ability to do identification testing. Isn't that true?
I'm not sure exactly as far as the identification testing. The FBI lab, in theory, isn't any different than our laboratory, only that it handles a different type of cases.
Well, in theory, but many, not all, because you've done some, but many of the samples in the library maintained by the FBI come from the FBI. Isn't that true?
Can you restate the question, please?
Many of the known standards in the CBI library come from the FBI. Isn't that true?
I don't believe that that is accurate statement.
Okay. There is not a centralized database of known standards shared amongst forensic laboratories for the purposes of analysis in a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. Is that your testimony?
No, we have databases such as the NIST library and different type of libraries that we utilize. But as far as like our samples that we receive or actually run are not from the FBI.
Okay. And isn't it true that there are in fact laboratories that can do identification using a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer? So you started out with the general search, and that was before the search warrant got there, right?
Yes, prior to the search warrant, we could obtain a consent to search by Walker SMS to be on the grounds and search the grounds.
And you searched Huh? Oh, did it? Can I approach the witness too?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show him defendant's exhibit S through and including OO. So S through Z and then starting with AA, et cetera.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to get all of those when you're ready.
Okay?
Do you recognize what I've provided to you there, sir?
Yes, I have.
And what is that?
The one set of documents, exhibits LL through OO are an apparent boot print in soil. And then exhibits 5,
I think it's supposed to be an S.
yes, S through Z, and AA through KK are lanes that we developed on the vehicle.
Okay. And these are photographs that were taken at the time of your search, is that correct?
The footprint in soil was taken while we had consent to search by the Walker SMS. And then after we obtained the search warrant for the vehicle, these are photographs of the processing of the vehicle itself.
But it all happened the same day, right?
Yes, the same day.
Okay. And the photographs fairly and accurately depict things that you saw during the course of the search, is that right?
Yes, they are.
Judge, we would offer defendant's exhibit S through OO.
Objection, Mr. Rubenstein.
No objection.
Defendant's exhibits S through and including OO are all admitted.
Can I approach?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, I am going to publish II with the court's permission.
Is there any objection?
No, sir.
That's fine. You can
I
proceed.
I have no objection to him publishing any of those.
Okay, so you feel free to publish S through and including OO
Thank you.
without objection.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So one of the things you're doing is you are processing the car for prints, you've said, is that right?
Yes, the exterior of the car, yes.
Okay. Can I approach the...
Yes, sir.
What this is a photograph of is, this is a photograph of the actual contact, or the latent print cards you developed, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Permission to approach the exhibits, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, this right here, you see,
Yes.
this right here is in fact that in this photograph, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So when we see this, I mean, lay people can look at this and they can see the ridges and stuff like from a fingerprint, right?
Yes.
But what the photographs show us is this was actually physically taken off of the trunk of this car, is that right?
Yes, it was.
So what you do is you see what appears to be a fingerprint, you dust it with crime scene stuff, right? Fingerprint powder.
Yes.
And then you put this card on it, and the powder pulls that print up and puts it on this card right here.
Yes, some of the other photographs you had were, after we dusted it, we photographed it before we attempted to collect it, and then we have this photograph that shows the actual collection of those fingerprints, or apparent fingerprints.
And those cards are actually taped to the car where the prints were found, is that right?
Yes, they are.
Okay. If I could have 1 second, I need to get another photograph up. Judge.
Thank you.
So, we know people are actually touching the car there, right?
We have the CBI analysts that were processing the exterior of the vehicle. We wear gloves to prevent any type of contamination. And then the investigators, the fire investigators that were processing interior were doing as well.
So, you guys are wearing gloves, those aren't your prints, right?
That is correct.
So what we've got is, we've got actual fingerprints on the trunk of the car that, did you know that trunk was left open by whoever set it on fire?
Unless I was informed by the investigators, I do not recall if it was open or closed.
Okay. But if that trunk had been left open, then if there's fingerprints on it, that's kind of a big deal, right?
Whether it was open or closed, we don't determine if it's a big deal or not. If we find something, we're going to collect it.
Okay. But in the world of crime scene processing, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to err on the side of collecting it, right?
Yes.
On the other hand, it's not physically possible to collect everything at a scene. I mean, you can't like pick up every pebble on the ground, right?
No, you make the best effort to collect anything that's probative to the case, as well as that could possibly be in the case. For example, the prints, anything that cannot be later go back to, we want to collect there at the scene.
Okay. And it becomes pretty easy to say this falls within the realm of things I'm going to collect when it's a fingerprint on a burnt car, right?
Yes.
That's an easy one. All right. This one here you collected and you identify, oh, I'm sorry. This is JJ. This one here you collected and you identified it as a boot print, is that correct, or a shoe print?
We didn't identify it. We labeled it as a possible shoe print, only because of the nature of there's a pattern there, and it was our estimate that it could possibly be a shoe print, but we did not identify it as a shoe print.
Okay. Now, prosecution referenced the fact that there's some dispute over whether or not it's a shoe print, is that right?
It would be determined, somebody who's a latent print examiner or somebody who's a professional in that, it could make that determination.
Fact of the matter is, you dusted the car, and something touched the car there, right?
Yes, and we would collect it.
Okay. And you collect it because it'd be important to know who's touching the car and what with. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And the fact of the matter is, that's a pretty clean print, right?
The overall pattern is definitely some type of pattern there, and that's why we collected it. As soon as we saw something that was not normal, or that stood out to us, we collected it.
You also collected, whoops. You also collected shoe prints from the ground, right?
Yes, we did.
Showing what's been previously marked as MM. Maybe. So these shoe prints, you're walking around.
Said we err on the side of caution, and we're going to collect it.
All right, so if it looks like it might be helpful, you're going to collect it, right?
Yes.
And collecting things like fingerprints and boot prints in the dirt, shoe prints or some kind of print on the back of the car, you got to collect all that before you can test it, right?
That is correct.
But collecting it and putting it on a shelf and forgetting about it doesn't really help answer any questions about the case. Would you agree?
I cannot answer to that. It's collected and is turned over to the investigating agency, and then they make the call what gets analyzed.
Wait. You're telling me collecting it and doing nothing else beyond collecting it is a valuable use of resources?
I cannot speak to the intent or to that, other than that it was collected. You'd have to ask the investigators in this case as to why or why not something was analyzed.
Okay, well, can you answer this? Would you collect things unless you thought they were going to be helpful?
We would collect any and everything at a scene, because once we step away from that scene, it may never be there. And it is, since we are unbiased at the scene, we're just going to collect everything. We'd collect the kitchen sink if we thought it was important. But it's the investigators in the case to determine what needs to be analyzed, what best resources such as CBI's laboratory to do analysis. And so I cannot speak to as to why something was or was not analyzed.
Okay, so you don't have any concerns whether or not things that are collected get analyzed? You just go collect it, it's no big deal to you what happens after that?
We collect it and we turn it over to the investigators. We collect everything that we believe is part of the scene and then some. Because the worst thing that we could possibly do is step away from a scene and somebody later say, oh, we forgot something. So we're going to collect it and we're going to submit it to the investigating agency, and then they determine what's probable and what's of evidence.
Wait, the worst thing that could ever happen is what?
As an investigator, as a crime scene investigator myself with CBI, the worst thing that I could do is not collect something and then later ask, what about something? And so if it's there at the scene and we saw it and we didn't collect it, that would be my worst case scenario.
Did you collect the door handles that were on the ground next to the burnt car?
No, we did not. Those were portions of the fire debris that I believe were placed back into the vehicle when it was collected and towed back to the Mesa County Sheriff's Office.
And are they in evidence?
I believe they're part of with the vehicle itself.
And why were those not collected so that they could be tested?
Due to the nature of the burn and the extensive distortion or burn from the fire, something like that probably would not receive any type of further analysis because prints or anything else would be removed by the flames.
Wait a minute, Mr. Saluto, you just said that what got tested wasn't something you were going to get involved in. That was totally up to the investigators. But these door handles that were left on the ground, those you have an opinion shouldn't get tested?
Those would have been, as far as testing, yes. They would have been placed back in the vehicle and secured with the vehicle that was then towed back to the impound lot in Mesa Counties. If for some reason at a later time something was done with it, then we would do something with it, but that would be an investigator's call.
Okay. So I just want to be real clear. the door handles that came off of the burnt car that were laying on the ground right next to the burnt car, they were in fact taken into possession and put back in the car so that they could be tested by somebody if somebody chose to, right? That's your testimony?
My testimony is that they would be put back into the vehicle. As far as whether they would be tested, I cannot speak to.
I understand that part. I'm not asking about that testing. I'm asking about they were put back in the vehicle, right?
They were part of the vehicle that was turned back over to the Mesa County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. And there's no way that a random searcher found handles and mailed them to Frank Bergfeld, the mother of Paige Bergfeld, because they never got left behind, right?
I could not speak to that. When we left the scene, we turned everything we collected over to the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, and then we left the scene. So the vehicle had not been removed from the scene at that time. So I cannot say whether or not they would be, but they were part of the scene that was to be secured by Mesa County.
I'm confused. So you can't say that that didn't happen, is that right? Or you can say that
I
didn't.
cannot say what happened to those door handles, other than they were part of the scene that was turned back over to Mesa County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. May I have a second, please?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Rubenstein,
I have no redirect based on that, Your Honor.
can you be released from a subpoena?
You may be released, yes, sir.
No objection.
No objection. You're released from your subpoena and free to go, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're welcome. The people's next witness, please.
We have a couple of out-of-order witnesses that are from out of town on other topics, if we can take them.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Feel free to stretch if anybody wishes. Thanks.
Churches and Ralph Clark. Ralph Clark's a guy from Hutchinson. Call Kenneth Churches to the stand, please.
Thank you, sir. If you'll be careful of this black cord, and I need to give you an oath before you testify. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you, sir. If you have a seat in the green chair by the microphone, please. And I'm sorry, the name Kenneth Churches?
Churches,
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Would you state your name for us and spell your last name, please?
Kenneth William Churches, Churches.
And Mr. Churches, how are you employed?
I work for the Colorado Department of Transportation.
And what do you do for the Colorado Department of Transportation?
I'm a bridge inspector.
Are you currently working in another part of the state?
Yes, I work out of the Denver area.
Okay. Were you employed by the Colorado Department of Transportation back in December of 2008?
Yes.
And at that time, what were your duties for the Colorado Department of Transportation?
A bridge inspector back then also.
Okay. Do you remember finding something in early December that caused you to call law enforcement?
Yes.
What did you find that caused that call to occur?
I found a driver's license of a missing person at that time, and it was on the news nationally.
Okay. So you were, by looking at the driver's license, you could tell that it related to a missing person?
Yes.
Do you remember the name of the missing person?
Paige Bergfeld.
Okay. Now, were you with somebody else when you found the driver's license?
Yes.
And where were you working?
At the time I found it?
Yes.
I was on Highway 50 at about mile marker 51.2.
Okay. And when you say mile marker 51.2, where is that in relation to, I mean, are there any landmarks through there? Are you in Delta County or Mesa County? Can you tell me?
I believe it's in Mason County. It's just on the north side of Bridgeport Road.
Okay, so down by a road that goes, that's called Bridgeport Road?
I believe it's called Bridgeport Road, yeah.
Okay. And tell me what you remember about finding the license. How did you find it?
It was our first inspection of the day, I believe, and I get out of my truck and I'm walking down towards it's a culvert, but we consider them bridges. And I looked down on the ground, I saw a driver's license, so I picked it up and I looked at it, and that's when I found it.
That's when you
Before I
figured-
started the inspection of the bridge.
Okay. Upon finding that license, what did you do?
I stuck it in my back pocket and continued on the inspection, but then I got so nervous that I was like, okay, we need to call somebody.
Okay.
And so,
Did you eventually call law enforcement?
yeah, I called Star CSP.
Okay. And did you meet somebody from law enforcement and turn the license over to them? Early December along Highway 50 at about mile marker 51?
Yes.
Okay. I'd ask to admit people's 470 this time.
No objection.
.470 is admitted without objection.
And Mr. Churches, do you remember having to give your fingerprints to the sheriff's office as a result of having handled the license?
Yes.
And you didn't have any gloves on when you picked it up?
I
out of-
didn't.
Okay, all right. Nothing else at this time, Judge?
Cross-examination, Mr. Colvin.
Thank you, Judge. When Highway 50 at this place gets confusing because it's kind of going north and it's kind of going west. So rather than talking about whether it was on the west side or the east side or whatever, it was on the side of the road that you'd be on if you were going towards Grand Junction from Delta. Is that right?
No, it was towards Delta from Grand Junction,
Okay,
and we're on the right side of the road.
okay. Would you recognize pictures that were taken at the time it was found?
Possibly.
All right.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you will be able to, but do you recognize these?
This one,
Are they marked as exhibits? I'm sorry.
Oh, I need to do that. I apologize, Judge.
You're up to 00, I think was the last. Sorry, 00 was admitted, so it could be a PP, I guess.
I have PP and QQ that I'm now showing to the witness.
Thank you.
And I'm sure I know which is which. Okay. So I'm showing you two photographs that have been marked PP and QQ. Can you tell me, I think you started to say you recognize one of them at least.
yeah, I wouldn't know that one. I recognize our van there, and I recognize the van there.
Okay? So in these pictures, there's a van that's the same van that you use when you're working inspecting bridges?
Correct.
Okay. Does this look like the area where you found the driver's license?
We've been on this other side of the van.
He would have been on the other side of the road?
Yeah.
Why are you parked on the wrong side of the road from where you found the driver's license?
We tried to get down to the bridge as the easiest access, and there's a barbed wire fence here on this side, and so the other side, I think, was easier to get across. That's the only one I think of.
I'm
I don't know.
I'm not arguing with you, I'm confused.
Yeah,
So you park on the side going towards Grand Junction to get over to the bridge?
the bridge is right here. You can see bridge here, and it goes all the way underneath Highway 50.
Oh, I'm with you now. All right. Man, that took me a long time. Why are there a bunch of photographs alongside the road on the wrong side from where you found it? You know?
That I wouldn't have any idea.
Well, did you make it clear to them where you were at when you found it?
As far as I know, I don't know.
Okay. Judge, I guess I would go ahead and offer PP and QQ into evidence.
Do you have an objection, Mr. Waite?
Judge, based on the testimony, I don't know what the relevance is, so I would object on that basis.
Other photographs of his van and the parking place he was at when he discovered the evidence that they just admitted into evidence, so at least context for that.
The objection's overruled. PP and QQ are both admitted.
Thank you. I appreciate your clearing that up for me. I have no further questions.
Mr. Waite, redirect.
Nothing based on that, Judge.
Is this witness under subpoena? If so, do you release
I'd
him at
ask that
this
he be
time?
released, Your Honor.
Mr. Colvin?
No objection.
All right, you're released from your subpoena, sir. Thank you, and you're free to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The people's next witness.
Your Honor, the people would call Ralph Clark to the stand.
Feel free to stretch, as always. Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. I just need to give you an oath before you testify, and if you'll be careful, this black cord we have stretched across there. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you, sir. If you have a seat in that green chair by the microphone, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello,
Would you state your name for us and spell your last name, please?
Ralph Clark, C-L-A-R-K,
Mr. Clark, where do you live?
Crawford, Colorado,
How long have you lived in that area?
my whole life.
Okay. Do you know a Lester Ralph Jones?
Yes, I do.
And how long have you known Lester Ralph Jones?
Approximately 40 years.
Do you see that individual in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Can you identify him, please, by where he's sitting and what he's wearing?
Right over there with a gray jacket. I believe he's behind the screen there.
Okay, you kind of pointed over towards my side of the courtroom and towards a table that's located there. Can you tell me a little bit more about what he's wearing there?
He's sitting behind the computer screen. There you go. Gray shirt with the gray jacket over the top, looks like.
Your Honor, I'd ask the record to reflect he has identified the defendant, Mr. Jones.
Any objection, Mr. Colvin?
No, sir.
The record would so reflect. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Did Mr. Jones live in that same area during some of the time you've known him?
Yes,
Okay. Did you once work at the Crawford Fire Department?
still do.
Okay, you still work there? What do you do at the Crawford Fire Department?
Just a volunteer fireman.
Okay. When you worked there before, did you do the same types of things?
I've been fire chief and odds and ends. I've been on the fire board too and am at this point.
Okay. So you've had a lot of involvement with the Crawford Fire Department?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about what some of your duties are, first of all. What do you do if you're the fire chief or a fireman for the Crawford Fire Department?
Basically oversee the activities. It's a volunteer, very small organization. They meet usually twice a month. Oversee the maintenance of the trucks. Fire chief is in charge at all fires. about it.
Certainly involved in the suppression of fires that happen up in that area?
Oh, yes.
What types of fires do you guys get up in that area? Usually?
A little bit of everything. I mean, we've had house fires. We have a lot of lightning strike fires in the summertime, controlled burns that get out of control, a little bit of anything and everything.
Okay. What kind of training do you get to be able to work at the fire department there?
There's some training given. It's mostly on the job and, you know, word of mouth. The firemen kind of help each other out. Have a pretty good turnover there with a small department, and it's mostly on the job training.
So when you say mostly on the job training, I assume do you guys do training exercises?
There are some of that, yes.
Okay. What types of training exercises do you do to get trained?
Wildfire stuff, you know, just training with the chainsaws and that sort of thing for wildfires, house fires, SCBA packs.
And when he worked there, when you were the fire chief, what were his duties?
He was one of the volunteer firemen at that time.
Okay. One of the people that went out and dealt with fires when they happened?
Yes.
One of the people that got the kind of training that you've talked about up till now?
Probably some of it. It's been a long time ago, so I would say most likely he got some of it, yes.
Okay. When you stepped down as the fire chief, who took over that role?
Mr. Jones did.
Okay. And do you know how long he served as the fire chief in Crawford?
I don't, I'm guessing probably 8 to 10 years.
Did you work with Mr. Jones directly?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say that he knew his way around a fire truck?
Yes, he spent quite a little time working with him.
Would you say that he knew what he needed to know to be a fireman for the Crawford Fire Department?
Well, he knew as much as any of us did, I would assume.
Okay. Nothing else, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Coleman, cross-examination.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You were interviewed by the Sheriff's Department about this case in February of 2011, is that right?
I talked to the sheriff's deputy or investigator at one point. I can't tell you when, but approximately then, yes.
Okay. February 2011 sounds about right to you?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. And then you talked to him again after that, again, back in 2011? You remember the
Yes.
second time?
Yeah, I did talk to him 2 times.
Okay. And when you talked to him, you said that occasionally you had a fireman from Grand Junction come in to do some training with the volunteer fire department, right?
We did. I'm not sure what time period frame that was, but yes, we have had.
Okay. But you didn't remember any specialized training that you had been to with them, right?
I don't know what you mean by specialized. The training that we had from the Grand Junction firemen that came up were house fire training basically, and the SCBA packs.
Okay. Well, I don't know what specialized means either. You told them that you remembered firemen from Grand Junction coming in to do training with them, but you could not remember anything specialized. You remember telling them that?
Something to that effect, yes.
Okay. So it sounds like you had in some guys that had maybe some more experience doing some stuff than you all had, but this wasn't like National Fire Academy training, right?
No, it certainly wasn't that. It was, you know, a couple of 2 or 3 hour sessions, or maybe 3 or 4 times they were up. I don't remember.
Okay. And it certainly wasn't anything like arson investigation, was it?
No, they touched on some of the stuff that you look for to suspect arson, but
Yeah? You remember that?
I do remember that.
Okay. Was there specialized training on car fires?
No, I don't think we ever discussed car fires in that particular.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Wade, redirect.
Nothing on that, Judge. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
And Mr.
Is-
Clark could be excused.
Thank you. Any objection?
No objection.
You're released from your subpoena and free to go, sir. Thank you. The people's next witness.
If I can just a moment.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, the people would recall investigator Mike Pachota to the stand.
Oh. Feel free to stretch if anybody wishes. Good afternoon, sir. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you, sir. If you have a seat in the green chair, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you please tell the jury your full name and spell your last name?
It's Mike Pachota, Piechota.
And are you the Mike Pachota that testified previously in this case? Did you participate in the crime scene collection at the vehicle fire on July 2nd, 2007?
I did.
And as part of that, did you obtain and photograph a day planner?
Subsequent to that, yes.
Okay. As part of your duties related to that?
Correct.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to hand you what's marked People's Exhibits 549 through 574. Also, Your Honor, if I may, remove one of the items from the card.
Sure.
Investigator, I'm also showing you what's previously been entered into evidence as Exhibit 505. First, sir, if I can have you just open the box and look at Exhibit 505. I'm not going to have you remove the item, but if I could just have you look at the cover of it and see if you recognize it.
I do.
And is that the day planner that was recovered from the vehicle?
Yes.
As part of your responsibilities in the case, did you go through that day planner and photograph it?
Yes.
If I could have you look at Exhibits 549 through 574. Do you recognize those photographs?
Yes,
Did you take those photographs?
I did.
And are they all of the day planner? Either the exterior or pages inside?
They are all from inside and one exterior picture.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move to admit People's Exhibits 549 through and including 574.
Any objection, Mr. Colburn?
No, sir.
People's Exhibits 549 through and including 574 are all admitted.
Ms. Watson, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish these.
Any objection?
No objection.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
And Ms. Watson, if I can just have you start with 549, but we'll skip some. Investigator, at the point that you removed that from the vehicle and booked it into evidence, can you describe its condition?
Like it is in the box.
Except, was it extremely soaked wet?
Yes, it was completely saturated.
And then was that from, as far as your understanding, that was from the putting out of the fire, suppression of the fire?
Yes, sir.
That was inside the car that they were putting the fire out on?
Correct.
Okay. So People's Exhibit 549 is up behind you without showing the jury the box. That's basically what the outside of the day planner looked like then and now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now inside, Ms. Watson, if you could go to 550. Inside, would it be fair to say that there were a lot of pages with writing on them that looked similar to that?
Yes.
And the day planner had an address section, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, Ms. Watson, if you could go to 551, please. When you went through the address section, did you recognize names that were associated with the investigation into the disappearance of Ms. Bergfeld?
I recognize some of the names that were found in the,
For just that they got dental records for identifying her remains?
that's my understanding.
Okay, and then Ms. Watson, 553. And Julie Gizzy, were you familiar with that name, Julie Gizzy?
I am not.
Okay. Okay, so as part of this, you also looked through the calendaring part, right? Go ahead. So
Actually, I believe she was with Pampered Chef.
Ms. Gizzy was one
Yes,
of the
I believe
people
that was
associated with
Pampered
Pampered
Chef.
Chef.
Sorry.
Okay. As part of this, you looked through and there was daily pages, but there was also monthly pages, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you notice anything about the pages related to the dates when Ms. Bergfeld went missing?
On the weekly section, those pages were absent.
Okay. And did you photograph all those pages?
I photographed all the pages.
And those are the pages leading up to, well, Ms. Watson, if I could have you go to 554, please. So is that, I think you described it as weekly, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, and so that looks like it covers actually the entire month of January, either on one side or the other, is that right?
Correct. Actually, this is the monthly view, not the weekly view.
Okay, so there was a monthly view and a daily view, is that correct?
And a weekly.
And a weekly as well. Okay, let's
That I
talk,
recall.
let's talk about the monthly. In the monthly section, did you, so this is January of 2006, that was about a year and a half before the disappearance, is that correct?
A year and a half, yes.
This is 2006, she
Correct,
disappeared in
year and a half.
2007. Okay, and Ms. Watson, if I could just have you scroll through from 554 up to up to 570. And actually, Ms. Watson, at this point, if you're on 562, it looks like if you just want to skip to 570, please. Is it an accurate statement, Investigator Pachota, that every month of 2006 was there,
Yes.
and every month of 2007 was there, with the exception of June of 2007? Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then it resumed back in July and continued on?
Correct.
And then there's also a daily view. Ms. Watson, if I could have you go to Exhibit 573, please. And is that what the daily view pages look like?
Yeah, and that's what I was referring to as the weekly, but yes, that's,
Okay, so
Daily
there was a
view.
monthly and a daily, but no,
Correct.
okay. And how about the pages related to around the time of her disappearance for the daily view? Were they missing as well?
from the 26th through and including the 29th. were
Okay,
missing.
Ms. Watson, if I can have you go to Exhibit 574, please. And so is that what it looked like when you recovered it from the vehicle?
That is what it looked like.
Were you able to determine any other pages that were missing other than the 2 pages showing between the 26th and the 29th?
No.
Okay. You also recovered a few other items from the vehicle. Is that right?
Yes,
A wicker basket?
yes.
May I approach, owner? What item are you looking at, sir?
I'm sorry?
What item are you looking at?
It's my item, GMP 16,
What exhibit item?
579.
Okay, and is that the wicker basket that was recovered from the trunk of the vehicle?
This is,
Did you also recover a sort of melted key fob?
yes.
If I can approach, owner?
Yes, sir.
577.
Thank you.
What is that item, sir?
This would be the, like, keyless entry system into a vehicle.
Okay. Do you recall where that was located?
In the front compartment of the vehicle, my recollection, it was on the driver's floor.
Okay. And is that item 578? No, excuse me, 577?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I'd move to admit 577.
Any objection to 577 being admitted? Mr. Colvin? 577 is admitted.
And finally, did you locate a sort of melted makeup bag?
I did.
If I can approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I'm handing you, it's marked People's Exhibit 578.
Sorry, you weren't near a microphone, so the question, I don't think will be on the record.
Sorry, Your Honor, thank
It's
you.
okay, thanks.
Do you recognize that item, sir?
Yes.
Is that item 578?
Yes, sir.
Is that a melted makeup bag that was recovered from the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall where that item was?
The rear passenger floor.
Thank you, sir. I would move to admit 578, please.
Any objection, Mr. Colvin?
No, sir.
578 is admitted.
And Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness. Oh, I'm sorry, Judge, did I admit 579?
No.
I would move to admit 579 at this time.
Do you have an objection to 579, Mr. Colvin? The basket?
Oh, no objection.
All right, 579 is admitted. Cross-examination, Mr. Colvin. Do you have any idea of how long you might be? We're just
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay, perfect, thank you. No rush, we can always come back if you need more time, thanks.
In reviewing this day planner, did you find any appointments in it anywhere that were clearly Models Inc. appointments?
Not that I recall.
Nothing further.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Just very briefly, there were pages where there was just things like an address written down or something like that, right, with no indication of why?
Correct. I had no idea the genesis of what those were for.
Okay, nothing else, Your Honor?
Mr. Colvin?
No, sir.
No, all right, thank you. Still under subpoena?
He's still under subpoena for other issues, Your Honor. We'll
Okay,
just keep in touch
you'll
with him.
just stay in touch with the lawyers, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and take our evening recess, ladies and gentlemen. We have, I think, a 9 o'clock start time every morning. Haven't looked at it. Let me double check. Yes, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if you could be back shortly before that, at the jury commissioner's office, we'll get started at 9 o'clock in the courtroom with you. Hope you have a good evening. Please try to avoid all media coverage. Thank you so much. Please rise for our jury. record, our jury's left the courtroom. Anything else before we recess, Mr. Waite?
No.
Ms. Smith?
No,
Anything
thank
else?
you.
No? All right, thank you. You are the closest to the microphone, so. All right, thank you. We're in recess. I'll see you back tomorrow.